From teen entrepreneur to a trusted marketing expert, Nathan Littleton has built a thriving business helping companies grow through the power of email and relationship marketing. In this episode, he shares the exact strategies he used to scale, the mistakes he made along the way, and how you can build your business to attract loyal clients and grow sustainably. If you're serious about business growth, this one is definitely one for you. The first question I'm going to ask is, you started your first business as a teenager. I want you to take me back to that moment and what inspired you into business at such an early age.
I think the main thing was that I had a hobby that I quickly realized that I could make some money from. Like if I looked at my friends at the time, I had a couple that had paper rounds, I had one or two that worked in the local shop stocking shelves, and they were earning some money, but not a huge amount really. And I didn't want to do that. I had a hobby which I developed myself, which was building websites.
Right.
And those websites were, for one thing, pretty awful if I were to look back on them now, but they were aimed at other 12-year-olds. So
Right.
12 is when I'd started the business, and I made websites that had games, they had jokes, they had funny stories. It was back at a time where you could take content off the web and they would have like a little embed code underneath. Like if you wanted to include it on your website, you could copy the code and you could paste it into your own, which is what I did. I took things from other websites, I made things myself, and created the kind of websites that I thought other 12-year-olds would be interested in. And it was soon after that I realized, well, they're exactly the same skills that I developed by reading blogs and watching some really early videos online. They're the same skills that other people were using, but for businesses. And those people were earning really good money from it by building websites for small businesses, selling them, and living off the proceeds, which, even though I only really wanted to buy sweets, and I think with my first website, I think I went to Topman and bought a pair of jeans with my first invoice payment. And it meant that I could earn more money than some of my friends who had those paper rounds and worked in the local shops. But really, it meant that I could earn some money from doing something that I just so enjoyed doing. Like I was a sponge for learning, wanting to find out about coding and what made websites work for businesses compared to those ones I'd made for myself. And really to earn some money off the back of that as well. Hey, everyone's a winner.
That's brilliant. And how did you start getting into the web design? Like, was it? You said it was just as an interest.
It was, yeah. I describe myself as a self-proclaimed geek, and that is as true now at the age of 35 as it was when I was 12 years old. I was a bit of a geek. I was always on my computer in my bedroom, and yeah, developing websites felt like quite an achievement, particularly at that age,
Mm,
having created something
yeah.
that lived there and was on the web, and someone could go in and they could type. I think it was thejunkroom.com was the first website that I made. Terrible name, terrible website. But the fact that someone could type in that web address in a complete other part of the world and they could find the thing that I'd built in my bedroom, that was exciting for me as a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So I think that was what maybe spurred on. I want to learn how to do this and do it properly. And it was very rudimentary technology back then with something called, I'm not sure if you remember, Yahoo
Yeah.
GeoCities, which is like a really early website building platform. And then trying to develop that into, okay, I want to learn how to code. I want to learn how to design graphics and images that could go on there.
And how
And it all developed
and
from
how
there.
long was it? Was it a child helping other people into actually helping businesses? So was there a moment where you actually realized there might be a full-time business in this rather than just a little side hustle as a teenager?
Well, I think I was fortunate that I was a teenager because it meant that I could take some risks that I perhaps wouldn't have done if I was, leaving a corporate career or looking to start a business straight out of school. And I would have bills to pay, I'd have a car to run and things like that. So I got to make some mistakes and not have the pressure of, I absolutely need to make a certain amount of money each month to pay my bills. So I got to make those mistakes, but really it was just money for fun. That's all I was earning at the time. And it meant that I could have that money, I could spend it on the things that I wanted while I was learning those lessons. And I think really the turning point was just knowing that other people were making money from the same things that I was doing. Like, why wouldn't I do that? I remember actually the one of the first ever clients I got was literally just seeing a number on the side of a car as it went past. And my first thought was, well, I can't see a web address there. I wonder if you'd like a website. So, with all the confidence of a 12-year-old who doesn't know any better, I rang the number and said, hey, I think you should have a website. Would you like me to build one for you?
And how did it so So that was your early business. What does the business look like today?
Technically, it's the same business. I don't do websites anymore, but it is technically the same business. It started as a website design business. It developed into websites and email marketing. And I had a unique product, I would say 15 years ago, which was a particular type of email template that could be branded to individual areas of the business. So, did a lot of work with franchises, for example, where we would have one template that was for the franchise overall, but then we would sell to the individual franchisees to say, hey, we've got this great template that's got all the links through to your website, and we can personalize it to your area. It can have your photo, your contact details on it. So that was a great way of being able to make lots of money from one piece of work. So I mentioned it's the same kind of business because it went from websites into email marketing, into websites and email marketing, and now it is pretty much just email marketing. So the agency that I have now is called Paper Plane Labs, but it is essentially the same business. Most of the work that we do is built around creating email campaigns that make sure that you're top of mind with your audience. Like we're always having sales conversations, and we want to make sure that we're the first person that they think of if it's not the right time when we have that first conversation.
So I want you to try and put yourself in shoes of my audience, and they're not doing email marketing at the moment. And let's just say they're a service-based business based in the UK. Um, they might have contacts or they might buy contacts. Why should they start doing email marketing?
I think the simple answer to that is that there are potentially hundreds of people who would like to continue the conversation with you if only you gave them an easy way to do that. Now, I'm always going to say that email marketing is a great way to do it. Really, it doesn't matter whether it's email marketing or whether it's something else. Do you have a way of being able to reach your audience and stay in touch with them regularly? Now, I am slightly biased in terms of email marketing for a simple reason is that if it's not email marketing, it tends to be social media.
Yes.
But the challenge with that is social media companies are acting in their interests. Do you remember a few years ago, Facebook put a whole load of effort into saying, hey, you should create a Facebook fan page and then get lots of people to like your page, and then you can get your message in front of them. And people did exactly that. They got lots of people to like their pages. They built up this nice audience through their page. And then Facebook moved the goalposts.
Mm,
And that meant that all of a sudden, this work that you'd put in to get your message in front of your people
mm.
was suddenly nowhere near as effective as it once was. So the question would be, why would you put your ability to communicate with your audience at the mercy of one company and their own strategies that they want for their business? They're not really there to help you unless you're prepared to pay the money to do that. Why email marketing is so effective is even if you have things like GDPR, which is for your non-EU or UK audiences, is a regulation that we have that means there are tighter controls on who you can communicate with by email. Even with those kinds of things, you still have the most control over your ability to communicate with your audience than I think you do with any other form, certainly with social media.
Yeah, and actually, do you know what? I didn't have email marketing as one of my strategies until the start of this year, and it has been really great for us. It has been really, really great. It brings in leads every single week, brings in conversations every single week, and they're people that we've either been connected with or introduced to, or have connected with us, and we've got. Um, 3,000 people. So it's not loads and loads of people, but we've been able to basically build our one aspect of our marketing through the email marketing campaign. And now, do you know what? The reason why I never used it for years was because I didn't read emails in like from other people, and I just thought that it didn't work because I wasn't doing it. But I started talking to other people about it, and they were like, "It's a fantastic marketing strategy. You get constantly engaging with your audience, and people can either click on discovery calls or webinars, or like they have a next step, and you're regularly reaching out to them." So I've been astonished how impactful it can actually be. Um, yeah,
And it won't surprise you to know, Mark, that's not the first time I've heard that.
yeah.
That people will say, "Well, I haven't used it because well, people aren't reading emails anymore, are they?" Well, I think they are, and really, even for those people that say, well, I get so many emails in, I don't want to add to that noise that's in people's inboxes. I completely get it. And the idea isn't to be adding to the noise that's in people's inboxes. Even for those people who get tens or even hundreds of emails every day, there will still be one or two that they actually look forward to reading.
Mm,
And the real trick to getting it right is to make sure you're on the right side of that argument.
yeah,
There's a number of clients I work with where I always talk about having consistency in, let's say it's a newsletter that you're sending. If you're sending weekly or fortnightly,
yeah,
you're sending a newsletter out on a regular basis. I think you should make sure that you're sending it at a consistent time on the
yeah,
same day each week or each fortnight,
100%.
whenever you're
Yeah,
sending. And the reason for that is because we want to become a part of people's routine, but they've already got their routines. They already do those things at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday or at 10 o'clock on a Monday.
yeah,
So if we want to break that routine and become a part of it, we have to be consistent to be able to do that. And what you then find is if people are expecting to receive a newsletter that they're looking forward to reading, and it's supposed to come in at 10 o'clock every Wednesday, they'll start getting a message at 10:30 from one or two people saying, "Hey, is everything okay?"
mm, mm,
That I think is when you know you've hit the sweet spot of I've become a part of someone's routine. They're sitting down with their morning coffee and they're reading my newsletter before they start their day.
yeah. Imagine waking up tomorrow with a brand new website, one that finally reflects who you are, the value you bring, and the level of business you're building. A site that feels clean, modern, and confident. The kind of online presence that makes prospects pause and say, yes, I want to work with them. That's what Up in a Day specializes in. Founded by Lindy Novak, Up in the Day creates stunning, high converting websites for entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, and small businesses. No tech overwhelm, no endless decision loops, and no dragging the process out for months. Just clarity, simplicity, and a final product that elevates your brand instantly. Your website is often the first impression someone has to your business. It should feel aligned with where you're going, not where you started. If you're ready for a website that matches your ambition, set up a call on the link below, which explains what's possible. Your next chapter could be just one decision away. It's the same strategy with podcasting, like hosting a podcast. You release
Sure.
it consistently on the same time every week, and you become part of their routine. For a podcast, it's when they are commuting, when they're walking the dog, when they're at the gym, when they're running, being able to be part of their habits is incredibly impactful. And I think it's so important, and it's so strange. Like as I said, like I just didn't see it, and a couple of people said to me, no, 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 no. Really think about this. There is an issue with producing content, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit later about the strategies to do that. But it has been a real revelation for me that people, and I've heard people put newsletters in a separate folder every week, and they might have two or three or four that they actually, and they'll put it in a folder, and they'll come to it when they've got downtime in between meetings or at lunchtime or at starting the day. They'll then go to those emails that they actually enjoy reading, and they'll read into them. So it's yeah, I feel like you've convinced me because of my experience, but I wanted to get that sort of thought process for those people that haven't yet started an email newsletter. What were some of the early challenges that you faced in growing that business, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think some of my challenges came from, I want to say it's a unique circumstance of starting a business at such a young age. I love the fact it's all the more common now that there are so many people who are starting businesses at a younger age. But I remember just having issues around being able to enter into contracts for one thing, and had to really come up with the what I would call a common sense approach, which if I couldn't really have a contract with a client would simply be to say, well, if you don't pay me, I'll turn your website off. Is that okay? Funnily enough, people can't really argue with that. So that definitely helped. I think the scaling side of it, albeit at a small level, when I was at a young age, did present a challenge. I remember one particular client I had. It was the biggest client that I'd ever worked with before, and it was the biggest project that I would have ever undertaken at that point. And because it was the biggest and had skills needed that I didn't have, it meant that I had to bring team in. Now, because I was at school and because I was running a business alongside it, at that age, of course, I didn't have an office, I didn't have full time employees or anything like
Yeah,
that, but became very, very good, perhaps earlier than it's much more common now that people have freelance teams and they
Yeah.
work with people all over the world that are part of their business, but they're not full time employees. That was my only option. So I got very good at that at quite an early stage. We're talking 2004, 2005, where I was working with people all around the world that had the skills that would fill the gaps that I would need for certain projects. And I remember with this one particular client, I definitely needed additional skills. I didn't want to just say no to the project, but I felt confident that I'd be able to take it on, get the people who knew, who had the skills that would be needed for it, and get the job done. But it meant then that I had obligations to pay them for the work that they'd done, which is all well and good until your client goes bust and you're on a list of creditors from a receiver.
Right.
So I knew there was very little chance of me being able to get the money from them, but I still felt an obligation and still had an obligation, let alone just feel one, to pay the people that had done so much hard work for me in that particular circumstance. So, what did that mean? It meant that I had to scrape together whatever I could, work on additional projects that I knew I would never see the money from because it had to go to those people to pay. And I just feel fortunate, I think, that I was able to learn the lesson around how that was done in terms of taking deposits. I felt, I think, at that young age, a little bit overawed by, wow, this big client wants to work with me.
Mm.
And I kind of ignored some of the processes and the lessons that I'd learned around, well, we have a really solid contract in place. We take deposits and things like
Yeah.
that ahead of time so that we can cover some of those costs. I almost felt a little bit overawed and found that I was going against some of those lessons and some of those protections that would have been in place that might have avoided the whole horrible scenario.
Yeah, that's an early lesson to learn. It's incredibly difficult lesson to learn at such an early age.
It
Um,
is, particularly when you're getting the call between maths and history on a Tuesday afternoon. Yeah.
Brilliant. When did it actually move into so at 18, did you start making it in now into your full-time gig after you left school? Was that the process?
Pretty much. I went to sixth form, so up until 18, and even had my application in for university, almost hedging my bets of, do I want to go to university or do I want to do this full time and run it as a proper business?
Yeah.
Uh, I got accepted to university and had to make the decision at that point, and ultimately decided if I were to go to university, I would probably have to give up the business to give it my full attention, but I didn't want to do that and wonder whether I could have made it with the business that I had.
Right.
So I decided to do that. I got myself a little part-time job as well at Costa Coffee, which was really just a way to make sure I had the regular money for my car insurance and things like that.
Yeah.
So I was starting to get bills then, of course. But was just the nature of the fact I had a website design business.
Mm.
I might take in a 10 grand project one month and then not see anything for another 3 months.
Yeah.
So I needed to make sure that I had some regular income
Sure.
and could plan things appropriately. But other than that, as my mum still likes to tell me, I've never had a proper job.
Good for you. Good for
I
you. I
think I'm unemployable now,
Yeah, I
really.
spent 14 years in corporate and I've been out of corporate for 5 plus years, and it's like, yeah, I don't think I could go back to that now.
Yeah, it's funny. People tend not to miss it once they go the other way.
Um, so give me an example of a campaign or a case study of someone that you've worked with that really highlights how you approach working with a client and what you did for them to give them a success story.
A lot of the people that I work with tend to be independent, either speakers, trainers, coaches, consultants, those types of businesses. And the reason I tend to target those is because they already have an understanding that your knowledge, your expertise is your product. Rather than me working with other businesses where they want to sell product, they want to put out their offers. My ethos around email marketing has always been that you should be sending something out when you've got something interesting or valuable to say. And that comes so much from your knowledge and expertise. You can help people. That's the reason people are going to want to look forward to receiving your emails, is because it's going to help them to do something better or it's going to entertain them in some way. So working with those types of businesses means that they already know that. Creating the content is in many cases already a part of what they're doing. Being able to use a newsletter to point people in the direction of that content elsewhere is much easier for them than it sometimes is for other businesses. I don't just work with them, I work with other kinds of businesses as well, but I always find that they're the ones that understand it the most. And I always say that with something like an email newsletter, of course, you want to be generating leads and you want to be generating sales off the back of it. But I think the most important thing is that top of mind piece. Knowing that there are people who are looking forward to you receiving your emails means that all of those sales conversations you have where somebody says it's not the right time because the budgets are already set, they've already got a supplier that they're happy with, or the pain of change would be too much, you want to make sure that you're the first person that they think of in 6 months' time, 2 years' time, or my record is 7 years' time, which seems remarkable. But then you look back and think, well, they felt like they were having a conversation with me over that time. They were engaging with the content, even though to me it feels like they've just come out the blue from nowhere. They've been receiving content and engaging with it over a long time. So, as albeit a one-sided conversation in many cases, it still feels like they've been having a conversation. So a lot of the speakers and coaches that I tend to work with see the results in terms of the top of mind piece. So making sure that when they have, if they're a speaker, the events calendar is quite often set well ahead of time, and it only comes then to either the change in financial year or the change in calendar year where they look at their next set of events that they're going to need. And then it's a scramble to find speakers. It's a scramble to find panelists for their panel. There are lots of reasons why people don't buy from us in that first instance. We just want to make sure that we're the first one they think of when they do.
And let's just quickly tap into your speaking. So you've spoken on some big stages, and how has that strategy worked for your growth of your business? And what advantages, what benefits have you done from building that as part of your strategy for business growth?
It's a bit of a mix. If I'm honest, the reason I started speaking 15 years ago was because it was a great way to make sales. I remember a business coach at the time telling me you can deliver content for half an hour, 45 minutes, and you can pitch a product at the end, and you've almost earned the right to be able to give them that shortcut. You can pay a little bit of money and all this stuff that I've talked about. Hey, we can take care of that process for you for a small sum of money. So it was a great way of being able to make sales at the back of the room. But if I'm honest, then I developed a love for speaking. I developed a love for crafting keynotes, crafting content, helping people, guiding people through what for me feels like it's something that I've been doing all day, every day for many, many years, but they're trying to understand for the first time. So guiding people through that in a way that is interesting, is entertaining, became a bit of an art form for me and something that I learned to enjoy. And that means that the way I use speaking now is split really. Yes, it does help to push people through to the business and hopefully they become clients in the future, or at the very least we can continue the conversation with them. And when it is the right time, hopefully they will. But also paid speaking is a big part of what I do as well, and training, and that's some of the most important work I do, I think, because it means then we can take advantage of all of the testing that we do of what's working now compared to what was working this time last year,
Mm.
the subject lines we get to experiment with, and all those things. We get to give that information so that they can make use of it in their own businesses as well. So I always like to say with it, if you're looking to use email marketing, if you're looking to stay top of mind with your audience, we can either take care of it for you or we can empower your team to do that for you as well.
And what about podcast guesting? You're here with me today. You told me before we hit record that you've done quite a few shows. How have you built podcast guesting as a business growth strategy?
Yeah, I have done a few, but would like to do more. I think similar to yourself, Mark, I really enjoy it. I like having these conversations first and
Yeah.
foremost, but also what we're looking to do in lots of forms of marketing really is look to create partnerships and those strategic alliances where someone has an audience, you have a product or a message that you want to get across. How can we make it work for both of us? And I think podcasting is quite a unique form in that sense because it really is quite a two-way relationship between the podcast host and the podcast
Yeah.
guest. We've both got something to offer to enrich the audience, and hopefully there will be more people that will follow me off the back of it. There might be some leads and clients, of course, but just having a great conversation and looking to develop what you're doing further, I think is pay enough.
Yeah, it's a great medium, and I've been doing it for a long time now, and a lot of my peers when I started have fallen by the wayside, and I'm still going on because I just think there's lots of different levels of being able to use podcast guesting from the like when I guest on other people's shows, I find um it's useful to think about my sales processes, my sales techniques, how I'm communicating, and making sure that I'm being concise and I'm being explaining what I want to be talking about. It's a real on
Mm.
top of the leads and the fans and the followers and all those things which have value. Obviously, leads is what you're really looking for. It's also a really good way of being able to communicate, and I don't think that's necessarily something that you struggle with as you've been doing, as you've done talks and you do public speaking. But it is a different technique as well. It's a slightly different technique. That's something I've realized is standing and speaking for 30 minutes on something that you know a lot about. I wouldn't say is easy because there's challenges around it, but with the dynamic of someone else, like the host involved in the conversation, it can be sometimes for some of our clients with podcast introduction can be quite tricky because they don't know where I'm going with the conversation and what the angle. I try and reassure everyone on my show. Look, I'm not Piers Morgan. I'm not coming here to attack you or find an angle to. I'm here to publicize, promote you and your business, and it should be an enjoyable experience. But podcast guesting is really great because you get to audiences that you wouldn't normally get to, and I think that's what I've found as a person myself who podcast guests and also our clients that we've worked with, it's been really impactful for them on multi levels as well.
I think it comes back to that consistency piece again. It's a useful discipline to have as well. I think it's all well and good. There will be some podcast hosts where they will send the questions through ahead of time, and you can kind of frame your answers and things like that. I get the merits of that. Completely get it. I've found that quite a useful thing to be able to work with some podcast hosts on. But actually, there's an element of the unknown to I don't know what's going to come next.
Mm,
It's a test of your own expertise.
mm.
It's your test of your own memory of your stories and your early career as well, I guess. And yeah, it's useful, but it's enjoyable.
But I like the spontaneity of it. That's why I don't give you the questions beforehand.
Yeah.
Um, so you've worked with both small businesses and global brands. What have you noticed as the biggest mindset or strategy differences between working with a small business or a global brand?
The thing that always surprises me is actually how much better a number of small businesses are at some of the disciplines and some of the things that I talk about than the bigger businesses. And I understand it. From one side of it, it's, if there are multiple teams for it to work through, if there are much bigger numbers at play, then strategies have to be much more well considered before they're implemented. But I'll take you back to a story. I remember my mum telling me that they'd had a speaker in that was talking through networking strategy and how to get business through referrals and things like that
Yeah.
into her business that she works for. And she said, "Oh, it reminded me of you. It was some of the stuff that you talk about." And the speaker had apparently said, "Ask for referrals at every opportunity. Do you have a structured process for asking for referrals?" And she told me this, and I said, yeah, that's something I remember learning when I was like 12 or 13 and I'd first gone through business coaching programs. And she said, "Oh, that's really interesting because all of my bosses were like furiously noting this down and scribbling it down like it was some grand idea and really grand strategy." Small businesses, I think, are much more familiar with some of those
Yeah, I
ideas.
would
If
agree.
they've seen speakers, they've attended webinars and gone on online courses, I think it means they're much more adaptable. It means they're much more able to implement strategies more quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I would agree because I've been on both ends and the corporate element, like networking, you don't think of it as a strategy. And I think that's partly because you're cocooned around a large corporate company who can get calls with X client or Y client or like prospects. Um because that networking isn't as required. It's not as necessary because you have the brand. You make a phone call, they hear it's this company or that company, and they go, okay, well, we'll take that call. In small businesses, you have to think about nurturing relationships. And I wanted to ask you about how
Mm.
you make relationship building as part of your marketing with email marketing and with other things. How do you help your clients build those relationships that can be incredibly impactful for marketing?
Yeah, and the way I try to do that for my own business is exactly the same as I encourage my clients to. And that does come down to newsletters as a way of staying in touch and staying top of mind, but also trying to take a mindset of being a trusted advisor. As a trusted advisor, it doesn't necessarily mean that right now they're going to pay you lots of money to implement a great strategy for their business or improve something in their life. But knowing that you're there at the right time is the important factor. And I think people see through, particularly with AI nowadays and the ability to create so much content at such a quick pace that is relatively good. I think it's easy to underestimate that people do still see through those things and can still see a covertly crafted sales message that actually could have just been a nice piece of content that helps to introduce a lesson, is built on a story based on your experiences. And people will see through and see the difference between a trusted advisor and someone who is just there to make the sale right now, irrespective of anything else. So I think it comes to communicating with heart,
Mm.
using your stories, using your experiences, and having a, a thought of, I need to be genuine because people will see through it if I'm not. But actually, if you're having to make that as a conscious decision as well, is, oh, I'm going to be genuine, even though my instinct would be, I need to make the sales, I need to generate the leads in this way. Maybe just taking a look at your own values in your business as to what's most important to you. Yes, it is to bring the leads in and to make the money because you've got a family to feed and you've got bills to pay. Absolutely get that. And it can be a bit frustrating if it feels like it's a longer term game, but actually the longer term results from it are much better.
If you're enjoying this conversation and getting value from it, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Business Growth Talks. It helps me get in front of more people and discovering the show and bringing it to a wider audience. So thank you very much. I want to ask you, Nathan, about spam. How do we overcome the spam issue? What are the rules? Because someone in my team gave me the rules and I've forgotten them. What are the rules before it goes into spam, and how can we overcome that as a strategy to make sure we are getting the email marketing in front of the right people?
Oh, I was going to make a terrible joke about tinned pork, but I'll park that one. Yeah, spam is obviously an important thing that we need to consider. Uh, I think it is about taking those additional steps that are needed before a campaign goes out to make sure you have the highest chance of it being delivered. So there are some basic things in terms of the technology behind it that you can always look at. There are records that you could get your techie or your web developer to apply to your domain, and it means your emails stand a much better chance of being delivered. But then there are also more practical things that we should consider, like what is the ratio between the amount of text and the number of images in our email, because these are all factors that an email application or an email service will look for to decide, is this email spam or is it genuine and something that should go through. But in recent years as well, we've got other things to consider. It isn't just about whether it would land in spam. It's, will Gmail, for example, filter it into the promotions folder? Will
Mm,
Gmail
mm.
filter it into another folder or park it in their spam folder? So there are those things that we have to consider. And I think looking at the words that you use and having a almost a hit list of, these are the words that I definitely don't want to include within a campaign, can make some difference to it.
Like
But
what?
really, uh, I mean, the typical ones around pharmaceuticals obviously make a difference. Things that tend to be finance led, you have to be a little bit careful with. Essentially, any of the words that could be confused with the types of phishing emails or the types of emails that would usually go into spam because they have nefarious means, they're the ones to consider. But I always use spam checker tools. Most email marketing applications have them now, where you can just do a quick spam check of the email to see, is this likely to be filtered out and sent to the spam box.
Oh,
And that's a good discipline to have, if not just for getting your email delivered more frequently, but also helping you to understand, okay, what was it about that email that meant that it was flagged as spam, and could I then make a difference to my future campaigns?
yeah. I didn't know you could do spam checks. I didn't know that. So I'll be checking that out. Um, How has your business model changed over time? Are there services that you've tried, maybe unsuccessfully, and you let go? Is there anything during the years that you've tried it? Because a lot of the things you evolve a service and you often add on extra services on it, but it seems like you've kept very core to email marketing. Have you tried anything and it hasn't worked?
How long have you got? I've tried lots of things. I mean, I made a a significant change to my business model that I think short term would have been detrimental, but long term gave me far better sleep at night. Which was, I mentioned at the start that the business started as website design, and then I added email marketing into that. Well, website design, by its nature, most often is project based. So you will do a quote, and it might be £2,000, might be £10,000, £20,000, whatever it is. But unless you have a really consistent pipeline that is feeding the leads in and you're building websites really regularly, you have a team to be able to sustain that, it can be a little bit feast or famine. And I call it the marketing seesaw. Lots of small businesses fall into this trap of you need to get some work because the bank account's looking a little light. So you do lots of marketing. And then while you've got the work in, then you do the work, but the marketing stops.
Yeah, that's a
And I think that
massive problem for small business owners, especially
it really is.
solopreneurs as well. They have this feast and
Yeah.
famine, and they need to
Mhm.
realize you have to keep marketing.
That's it, which is tricky when you're on your own, of course, but that's where I think external support, you don't always have to employ someone full time or part
Mm,
time in an
mm,
office to get this stuff done for you. Seek the help where you need it. If someone is there and is able to put the work into at least making sure you're visible on a regular basis, that is going to help to make sure that you've got more work once a current project is finished. So I had that exact thing in my business, and it was very feast or famine. It was all project based, and I had some email marketing stuff that was being done, but it was mostly around building templates and things like that. So still really project based. And then I made the decision to drop websites completely and only focus on, at that time, only newsletters, which meant it might be £99 a month, it might be £300 a month, or £500 a month. In the short term, that meant that my revenue went down. But as I was looking to build it up, what it meant then was that as long as I could keep my clients that were paying a smaller amount monthly, as long as I could keep them and I could keep topping them up and adding one or two clients a month, I would have the recurring business model that I always wanted, which was not struggling or wondering where I was going to make the sales for this month when I wake up on the first.
yeah,
And it's just a beautiful thing having recurring revenue because everything else is so much easier. Everything I do now is pretty much monthly with a few exceptions like speaking fees and things like that.
yeah, of
And
course.
recurring business models are just a wonderful thing,
They are
particularly for small
wonderful. They
businesses.
100%, they are. They're a joy to have rather than
Yeah.
project based. Um, uh, what's the makeup of your team? You obviously you've implied a couple of times here that you use contractors as other people. What is the makeup of your team?
Yeah, it varies, and again comes back to really the discipline that I had to have when I was a teenager and trying to build up that freelance network. So I have a brilliant VA who keeps me in check as much as anything. I always said with my VA, I wanted someone who was proactive, but also it's almost like I need a manager. I need another pair of eyes on things to really see where are the priorities in the business and what do we need to do today? What do we need to do
Yeah,
this week? What do we need to do this month? So I have a brilliant VA. I have a bookkeeper and an accountant, of course. I've got a couple of people who work on delivery as well, which is fairly mixed in terms of what they do, but it might be creating campaigns. There's a lot of design work that goes into what we do as well. So having that not all reliant on me, even if sometimes, don't tell them, sometimes I think I could do a better job because I'm high and mighty and I think, oh yeah, I'd have done it much better. They're great. They're brilliant. It's just sometimes I can't help get past that in my own mind. But actually having that done for you and paying a fee to get that done, but freeing up your time to work on other things and where you're best placed, I wouldn't change that for the world. I'm still trying to get better at it. I'm still trying to get better at handing things off. That sometimes it can feel like I could write them a brief to do it. I could send an email out and give some instructions, or I could just do it. Well, that might save me 5 minutes now by doing it for myself, but actually, the other five times that I've got to do that
yeah,
this month, I'm going to have the same decision again and again.
yeah. No, absolutely. Um, what's one of the biggest marketing myths or misconceptions that you want to clear up for us today?
It might seem an obvious one, but the idea that email marketing is dead.
Right.
And we have talked about it a few times. In fact, I remember speaking at an event a few years ago. I was on a panel and people got to put sticky notes with questions on a board, and then the panel host would read them off. Uh, one of those sticky notes said email marketing is dead, which was obviously something aimed at me, but not even a question really. It just said email marketing is dead. And then when the panel host asked who was it that asked this question, or who was it that put this post-it note up, it was someone in the audience who was actually writing it slightly in jest, but he said he'd seen it in a message that he'd received from a company that was selling chatbots. I
Right.
remember chatbots being
Yeah.
like a real, it seemed to come out of nowhere and was a great way of being able to generate leads. What he only mentioned at the end of that was it was actually an email that they'd sent that had email marketing is dead as the subject line. So
Right.
even a company that is looking to promote a new shiny marketing method, a new channel that people can use, are still using email because it's tried, trusted, and reliable.
Yeah, it is. How do you think you've evolved as a leader?
That's a good question. Uh, I'm definitely still growing. I know my own behaviors as well, in terms of I will take my time to make decisions, but then I feel pretty confident that I've made the right decision at the end of it. I like to have all the facts. I like to be considered in the way I think through things. And I think the way I've developed as a leader, particularly over the last year, actually, not something I'll share in a huge amount of detail, but there's another organization I'm part of where I was almost catapulted into a leadership position very, very quickly. I had to learn quickly too. And having an understanding that I can make quicker decisions. And if there are consequences, or if it's only 80 or 90% as good as it would have been if I'd ever really considered it and thought about it, means that things get done and the right decisions get made in the end. And yeah, I learned a huge amount about myself and the way I work with other people. Being diplomatic is a good thing, but being a good decision maker is even more important.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say your risk appetite is now, and has it changed over the years?
It depends what with. I would say I'm generally quite risk averse, uh, which leads into, as I say, about my kind of leadership style as well. Is I like to know all the facts and things like that. I think that plays into my usual risk averse nature. But I think when the pressure's on, I become much more of a risk taker. And I think it's just the nature of it. I know how I work in certain types of projects, certain areas of my business, that some people might look at that and think, is this the same person? But it very much is. I think all of our behaviors, whether it be in leadership or whether it be in our working styles, are all adaptable.
Mm,
You know, we talk about DISC and other behavioral profiles and things like that.
yeah,
That talks as well about the fact that we have our kind of dominant behavior, but then we also have our behaviors that apply to specific situations. There is no reason really why a general introvert as I am should be standing on stages in front of 2,000 people and looking to be an entertainer. I do some stand-up comedy. I do all sorts of things that you wouldn't necessarily think would fit with my normal behavior and my normal personality. But we adapt. I think that's the most important thing.
so do you switch it on, whether you're a podcast guest, whether you're speaking, whether you're doing stand up? Is there sort of like Nathan off stage, either virtually or actually reality, and you on stage? Is there a like, because I've spoken to people who have done these kinds of things, and they're like me in my normal world, in my normal activities in life is this, and then I switch it on to go and perform, I suppose you could say, but go into performance mode.
I think there's an element of that. I'm not going to say it's like Jekyll and Hyde.
No, no, it's not, but it's like you so how I describe it, someone described it is like I go from like my life is running at like 70% all the time. There's some heights, sometimes it goes up to 80, but I know that if I'm going on the stage, I need to ramp it up to 100% straight away.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think I would describe it as being like an exaggerated version of
Right.
myself rather than a completely different person. And I think on stage in particular as well, people would see it and they would see a certain element of being inauthentic if it was a completely different person on
Yes.
stage, the
Yes.
person that was off stage. But being able to turn it up just
Yeah.
a couple of notches, I think is useful, particularly with big stage work. Is
Mm.
you're a very small part of a big stage. You almost have to, you're forced to do that because all of your gestures, your style, your voice has to be much bigger because of the room that you're in or the stage that you're on.
Yeah. What's the plan for the next 2 to 5 years?
Personally, I've got some changes as well. We're moving house soon. I've got lots of plans in terms of the business that will influence some of the things that I want to do personally as well. Which, by the way, it always should. If you're in a small business, it's a vehicle to be able to give you the lifestyle that you want and the things that you want to do for your family and for your kids. I think for the business, I am full steam ahead on trying to build not just a recurring revenue, but a passive revenue. What are the things that I can do within my business that will help me to earn money, will help me to grow the business and scale it, but it isn't directly me selling time for money. I like speaking, I like getting speaking fees, but no matter how well paid that is, it's still time for money
Mm,
ultimately. Um, I want to do more work that is around creating programs that people can join where they will pay their fee, and it doesn't matter whether we have 10 or 20 people in the program or whether we have 500 people in the program. The amount of work that is put in is relatively similar, and I think that's where you start to see scale is how can you remove that link between time and money,
yeah,
and that's what I want to do.
great. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same six questions to all of my guests. So, quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
The best decision I've made, I think, is to have run a business. I mentioned that decision that I'd made early on around whether I should go to university or run a business. Do I have any regrets about that? 90% no. It is definitely the right decision. And I do think I couldn't go into an employed decision now. But I think what I'd like to do is still continue education. I'd still perhaps even like to go to university at some point, but to do something that I'm really fascinated by learning rather than just what's going to give me the best job prospects.
Right.
And I feel for anyone who has to make that decision when they're at a young age, because it is really just a race to the top of what's going to get you, what's going to give you the best job prospects.
Yeah. Amazing. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
The best piece of advice is also the possibly the worst piece of advice,
Okay.
which is I remember an early sales coach that I worked with. I think I was about 15 or 16. I remember going to an event and he said to me that every no is one step closer to a yes.
Yeah.
And I
Heard
think
that.
lots of people get this. Certainly, sales teams get this all the time because I think it just gives them that 10% more energy to keep picking up the phone when everyone tells them to
Go and do right.
insert swear word here. Yeah, yeah. Uh, but it isn't true. It just isn't true. We want to make sure that those people can say yes later if we stay in touch with them. But ultimately, if someone says no to you in a sales conversation, it's because you haven't demonstrated the value or you haven't connected the value to their circumstances. And that's where we can improve what we're doing to make sure that the next sales conversation is better.
Interesting. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
I could count lots of people in that. Um, I remember winning an award when I was 16, which was like a young entrepreneur award. We have something called the Institute of Directors here in the UK,
Yeah.
and they had a program for young director. They had their annual awards, and they had for the first time a young entrepreneur award. Which I'd won, and then had a place on a coaching program with two business coaches, Andy Gwynn and Mary Collin, who I am still very good friends with today. I've been out to their place in Spain. We still talk all the time. I would count them as friends now rather than just mentors. But as a very fresh faced 16-year-old in business, I mean, I'd been in business 4 years, which is still, I mean, it was a quarter of my life at that point, but it was still, it was still at a very early age. Uh, they helped me to understand and get the benefit from all the lessons that they'd had and all the things that had gone wrong for them and all the things that had gone right for them, so that I didn't make those mistakes as well.
Brilliant.
So I have a lot to thank them for.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
I regret. I do try not to think too much in terms of regrets. I do have. I mean, you mentioned earlier around are there business ideas that I've had that haven't gone well? Of course there are. I think it's the curse of the entrepreneur that we always think of business ideas and they seem amazing at the time you think of them, and you put some planning in and they seem even better than they did when you first thought of the idea, but then things go wrong. Um, and I've had a few of those, and that sounds like it's a negative thing. There were a couple of those that I actually wish that I would have persisted with a little bit
Okay.
further
Right.
because they were unique ideas that probably just needed to have a bit more traction in the market rather than being something that in the first instance it felt like, okay, this was just a bad idea.
Can you
I'm
share?
not going to say
Can you
I'm not going to
share?
say that not every bad idea, that it isn't a bad idea. Of course, there are some, but there are definitely things that I would have liked to have persisted with. I remember creating 15 years ago a platform for businesses to be able to uh, create their operations manual. So at that time, really, it was just businesses had their operations manual in Word documents, and the really adventurous and flashy ones would put those Word documents in a Google Drive or a Dropbox. But other than that, it was just Word documents. I created a platform that would allow people to build their process manuals and have a website that people could access from anywhere to be able to do that. Relatively basic in its early form, uh, but these are much bigger. There are much bigger businesses now that do this in a much better way. I think there could have been a lot more mileage in that as a product for businesses if I'd persisted with it. Really, I thought it is a difficult thing to be able to implement at the kind of scale and the kind of numbers that I would want. But really, I think it was a missed opportunity if I were to look back on that now.
Mm. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for being
Welcome.
open about that. Was there a time that you wanted to give up, and what made you continue and pull through?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there was a time where I remember pulling an all-nighter because I'd left a project too late that was due for completion. It's not that I'd left it too late, actually. I'm being unfair on myself there. I think the curse of running a website business on your own is it's quite difficult actually to estimate the amount of work that a project is
Mm,
going to take.
mm,
If it's got lots of moving parts and things like that, but when you're on your own, you've only got so many hours in the day. And we had a launch date, something that had to be ready for. And the only way I could get that done was to pull an all nighter and get the job done that way. And there were times during that and times after that as well where I thought this is too difficult a business for me to run on my own. Would it not just be easier to get a job? I mentioned the thing that happened when I was a kid with that business going bust. It happened a couple of times afterwards, and I've had better protections in place, but ultimately still lost money, still lost trust with some suppliers that had helped me out on a project that I still have a responsibility to pay. And yeah, there are a number of occasions there where I've thought, wouldn't a job just be easier? But it's always something about running a business that had pulled me through.
amazing. Um, Tell me something that most people don't know about you.
Uh, well, we can go for a really quick and simple one, which is that my eyes changed color when I was a teenager. I don't think that happens very often. Um,
From what color to
yeah,
what color?
so they changed from brown to green, and I have no idea why. Apparently, it's fairly common, but everyone I ask says they've never heard of that
No, I've
happen.
never heard of that.
So that's a silly one. In terms of me, I'm a stand-up comedy geek. I mean, a certified nerd when it comes to stand-up comedy.
Who's your favorite?
Um, Too difficult to answer. I mean, when I tell you that on my kind of media drive that I have on my computer, I have something like 900 stand-up specials on there,
Wow,
which I think might hold a record for like the biggest collection of stand-up specials that anyone has ever had. I'm sure.
that's incredible. And you do it yourself now. What was it a sort of hobby sort of activity that you wanted to try out, or like, do you make money from it, or is it more a sort of like passion project for you?
Uh, I mean, let's say a bit of both. I did a bit 10 years ago as a way of trying to understand the mechanics of humor so that I could add it into my speeches and become a better speaker and more
Right.
money from speaking. And similar to my kind of speaking journey, then I fell in love with, oh, actually, this is a lot of fun creating jokes, making a change of one syllable or one word here can make a complete difference to a joke in a way that is much more prescriptive, I think, than speaking is. And I did that 10 years ago, really enjoyed it, then got really caught up with work and told myself when a project finished, a leadership role that I had that finished at the start of this year, once that's finished, I'm going to go back into it and I want to see how far I could take it. So recently I've made a little bit of money from it. And when I say little, I mean little. Um, but it is so fun to do.
Oh,
I
sure.
mean, I love speaking,
Yeah.
absolutely, but standing on stage and making people laugh for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, nothing like it.
I like. I couldn't even imagine doing it. I think it's an incredibly brave and almost inspirational thing that you've found something like this. So do you do open mics? Is that where you're positioning yourself at this stage?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, looking to develop into other things. I've got a solid 20 minutes, I would
Have you?
say. I mean, ask me again in 6 months' time when I've had some bad gigs, and then I might be talking very differently about it.
And next question, what does legacy mean to you?
I've had this question a couple of times through the years, and for a long time, I would have said wanting to make a difference to the next generation who might consider starting a business. Is there something that I could do to give them something that might make that process easier? And honestly, as much as I would love that to still be a thing, I don't think I'm needed in that area. There are so many more resources now. There are so many more people who are willing to help and can help in that area that it's probably not going to be my legacy. And I'm okay with that. But I think now what it comes down to is really wanting to build something that is bigger than me. And a few people have said this in my kind of close community. I'm in mastermind groups. I have mentors and colleagues, and this thing seems to come up a lot for other people that surround me. And I don't think I got it for a long time until fairly recently. I wanted to create something that lives longer than I do, but is a bigger thing than just, oh, isn't Nathan a good speaker? Isn't Nathan a good marketer? It doesn't matter how big it is, as long as it's bigger than me. And I think that would be the mark of whether you've left a positive difference in the world, even if it's only in your small corner of the world. That's
And what sort of thing are you so it was quite cryptic. Like what
okay.
i-
Sorry.
are you thinking that, like I'm really intrigued. Like what do you think that thing that's going to be bigger than you is?
I'm not sure I know yet.
Okay.
And I kind of have the benefit, I think, of being at a young enough age still to give myself the freedom to want to work that out in the future.
Right, right.
But I think the decision changes. Like I had always said that it would be, future entrepreneurs, it would be the next generation. And I don't think that's it. And maybe we shouldn't put the pressure on ourselves to be absolutely set on what that legacy is if we're not sure, because I don't think I am.
So
I'm still
you're
trying to understand.
35, aren't you?
Yes, yeah.
You're still a little baby.
Yeah.
In the
Exactly.
most loving and positive way. Like, I'm jealous. I'm 45, and I'm like, I see sort of like being 35, you still have so much more. You literally could probably work for another 50 years.
It's a scary thought, isn't
And you've got
it?
so like there's so much to achieve. So when I asked you about what legacy was, and you said like something bigger than me, I thought there was something that you'd conceptualized that you were thinking about doing. But I think at the moment, at 35 years old, like keep things open, and you never know what opportunities come. I always say that there's always opportunities that are around the corner, and you never know when they're going to strike. And as long as your eyes are open to those opportunities, it might be a podcast interview, it might be a meeting in the street, it might be going for coffee with someone that you've known for 6 years, haven't seen them for 6 years, or something like that. Networking, whatever it is, just be have your eyes open, and then in a little way, this sounds a little bit cheesy, but your heart open as well to those sorts of opportunities. And I think you got plenty of time to be able to work out
Yeah,
something
who's
that could be
hoping?
bigger than you. Lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you or learn more about your business?
LinkedIn's always a great way to connect with me. I am on LinkedIn. I should be the first one that comes up if you search my name. You can certainly look there. We've talked a little bit about email marketing. If there's a resource that I would highly recommend, I have a book that has 20 best subject lines in it. It's updated every year with the best ones that we find, and you can get that at subjectlines.co.uk.
Amazing. Right, a huge thank you to Nathan Littleton for him sharing his journey, his marketing expertise, and just some really practical strategies that he's been able to share with us that hopefully you will have enjoyed and be able to do for yourself. If you found value in this conversation, please do consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. It really helps us reach more entrepreneurs and business leaders that are serious about business growth. Thank you.